You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vet Rehabbers, it's a Behind the Vet Rehab Practice podcast today with vet physio Kim Sheader from the UK. Now, one of the things I love about these interviews is that vet rehabbers share with us their wins and their losses. Although it's not great that they made mistakes, when they share them, we get to learn from them. So when we find ourselves in that same position, we have the hindsight which we would never have had before. So you get to fast track your success by not repeating the same mistakes that other vet rehabbers have made. Now, Kim is the head of the physiotherapy and rehabilitation at the Ralph Veterinary Referral Center. I really love chatting to her. She shared with us the dynamics and benefits of working in a specialist referral center, and she also had some great tips and advice about practice layout and if she could redo her design, how she would rather have done it. Over to Kim. Hey Kim, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for asking me.
Kim, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field of veterinary rehabilitation?
Yeah, so I'm a chartered physio. I qualified to treat humans back in 2000. I worked in the NHS for 10 years and thoroughly enjoyed it. Had a specialism in respiratory, in actual fact, and liked working in intensive care with intubated patients. I did a lot of tracheostomy changes and tracheostomy care. But I then had a hand injury where I sprained my volar plate and had to be in with my fingers at 90 degrees basically in a splint for 6 weeks, and in that 6 weeks realised that my stress levels were considerably better when I wasn't working in the NHS, and that maybe I needed to rethink things. Because I was respiratory specialist, I didn't want to just suddenly leave and turn into an MSK specialist, because that wouldn't have been possible. I hadn't done it since I was a junior. And I sort of thought to myself, what did I want to do? And the answer was, I'd love to have been a zookeeper at that point in time. So I then thought, I can't really do that at 30 something. So what can I do? And the obvious answer was do physio with animals instead. So I was lucky enough to get on the RVC course at the Royal Vet College, and qualified 8 years ago now, and have loved every second of my slight career change. Yeah.
And that hand injury is not a problem now, is it?
No, not at all. Thankfully, the 6 weeks immobility shortened it suitably, and my volar plate is now perfectly happy again. So yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things that us vet rehabbers have to be so careful about, anything with our hands, because suddenly we can't practice, right?
Absolutely. Very scary.
So tell us a little bit about the practice that you're working now.
So I am in a brand new startup. We've been going only about 18 months now. We are a tertiary referral centre, so it's a big referral hospital set up in Marlow, which is just outside London for all the international people. And we have, it's a proper referral hospital. We've got all of the different specialities, and it's absolutely fantastic. So we've got neurology, soft tissue surgery, orthopedics, dentistry, oncology, cardiology, critical and emergency care, medicine, you name it, we've got it, and it's fantastic. We've got CT scanner, MRI scanner, full kit and caboodle, and I'm lucky enough to be head of physio and rehab here.
Awesome. So it's obviously small animals only.
Yes, yeah. Majority, probably 70% to 80% dogs, mostly, the rest cats. And there is, in theory, the ability to have other small animals, but I haven't seen any of them here yet. So.
And did you have a hand in setting up the practice?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to have been involved from way before the hospital even had a building. So I was lucky enough to have a say in my rooms. So I've got 2 rooms. I've got a physio gym treatment room, and I've got an underwater treadmill next door. So I've got 2 rooms next to each other. And yeah, I was lucky enough to have some say in that. And I also had a look at the So the plans were all drawn up, but we were all sort of able to give our thoughts and things. So that was quite interesting. It's interesting different people's needs and things they think of. So the one thing that sprang to mind as soon as I saw the plans of the hospital was that there wasn't anywhere for gait assessment, and the vets that had been involved were all emergency and critical care vets at that point in time. So they stretcher their patients in. They didn't think about a gait assessment area. So that got changed, and now we've got somewhere we can walk our dogs up and down. So that's quite helpful.
And is there anything that you would change? So anything that you set up and you thought, oh, that was okay, and now in hindsight you think maybe actually it isn't?
Yeah, it's so probably the two things that spring to mind. One which I thought would have been fine, and in hindsight I could do with more room, is my underwater treadmill. The ramps that come with the underwater treadmill, I actually find are too steep, and so they were quite short and were too steep, and a lot of my patients were struggling to want to get into the cope with the ramps basically. So we have a head of maintenance here who is fabulously handy with wood and metal, etc. And he's actually made me slightly longer ramps which do the trick, and the patients are much happier, but I now have less room coming in and out of my treadmill. So having a room that's long enough to fit your treadmill in, or it's not the treadmill itself, it's the getting your patients into and out of the treadmill with them happy to do so is something that I thought I'd got sorted, and in hindsight I could do with a couple more foot on each side of my treadmill. And then the other one that wasn't anything I'd ever considered, and it wasn't until we started here with patients here, is soundproofing. And my treatment room especially, you can't so much with the treadmill because I've got all my pumps and everything in there, so it's drowns out a bit of noise. But my treatment room, you can hear people walking down the corridor, and I'm opposite the dog ward. So if they're taking their dogs out, for any of the patients out for wheeze and toileting, and I've got a slightly nervous patient in my therapy room, then they spend a lot of time trying to stare at the door and work out what the dog is that's on the other side of the door. So yeah, that can be a little bit tricky when you're trying to get them nice and calm and chilled when they've suddenly got a woof the other side of the door, or even just claws on the lino. So I'd definitely look at soundproofing. Would be something if you think you're going to have a lot of movement outside your treatment areas.
Yeah, I suppose especially being a specialty practice, there are loads of hospital cases there, so there's loads of traffic.
Yeah, so busy. Yeah.
Which is probably good in a way, because you're probably getting a lot of referrals from in-house.
Oh yeah, so a lot of referrals, both in-house and externally, but the in-house referrals can be quite interesting, and we've had some fabulous, really interesting stuff. Lots of neurological either post-surgery or post-diagnosis, post-MRI with diagnoses of that need conservative management. But yeah, I've got a tetrapolitic whippet in at the moment that I'm trying to get back onto his feet and rehabbing. So thank goodness for my underwater treadmill fit with him, bless him. So yeah, it'll be really interesting. It's a nice diverse caseload. I see some vestibular dogs, which is quite good fun if they'll let me roll around on the floor with them doing Epley maneuvers and things and all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah.
So are those all hospital cases? So you have obviously a combination of clients bringing their patients to you, and then you have another time that you're seeing all the hospital cases.
Yeah, so I have outpatient scheduled appointments each day. And then I have areas of time that that are protected for inpatient treatment as well. So you can so I have, at the moment, because of COVID, my other member of staff is not around to help. So I'm doing the hydro and the physio. So I have specific blocks for hydrotherapy, then specific blocks for land-based physio, and then my inpatient physio blocks as well, so I can make sure I've got a chance to see everyone every day, basically.
So it must be quite a challenge treating those tetrapolitic patients. How do you manage that on your own?
So I'm really, really lucky, and that was one of the other things, that when the hospital was first being developed, I was able to ask for all my special toys and what would be on my wish list, and I have ceiling mounted hoists. So I've got 2 ceiling mounted hoists, one which is just a straight bar above my underwater treadmill, and then in my treatment room I've actually got an H-frame system, so I can move wherever the patient wants to walk within that room with them attached to the ceiling mounted hoist. And that is phenomenal, both for because if I don't necessarily have a second pair of hands all the time, it means I can treat patients that I'd never be able to treat by myself otherwise, and also just for the sake of all of our backs, basically.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
About all those patients I've leant over, holding the harnesses or putting your hand underneath them to support them. And is that something that you'd seen in another practice, or something that you'd extrapolated from your time maybe in the NHS with people?
Yeah, I think, to my knowledge, it's unique to this hospital. It was something I'd extrapolated from the NHS and seeing patients in the NHS, and I was like, the other thing is I'd also previously used a floor hoist with dogs, and it was always so unsuccessful because the legs of the hoist would either get in my way or their way or both, or the dogs would just panic at the fact they've got this big thing either side of them. Whereas I find with the ceiling mounted hoist, because it's just coming down from on top of them and they're in a sling that is not too dissimilar to, I feel they prefer it to the manual slings that's just like the belly band underneath their bellies. Having the full body sling that you would use, they're the ones that you would use for to get into a hydro pool. They're the ones that I use. They don't seem to be anywhere near as worried or anxious about them. So I can get a lot more therapeutic effect than I did with ever having a floor standing hoist. And that was one of my wishes from day one, that I wanted a ceiling mounted hoist. And I was very lucky to get one.
Sounds awesome. That floor one, are you talking about like one of those frames that has wheels with the tricky to move around, and
so cumbersome. And I've used both ones that are supposedly designed for animals and also human ones with animals, and they're just too cumbersome, and I was never got on with them, and it just always found that the dog would just panic completely, and it was just dangerous, and I ended up never using them. So yeah, I'm really happy with the results of my hoist, so it's good.
So how many patients are you seeing a day?
So at the moment we are incredibly busy, and I'm lucky enough to actually be getting more members, currently advertising for more members of staff because we're so busy. But an average caseload for me is somewhere between probably 10 and 12 patients a day, which is quite a lot. So
And are you getting obviously a lot of internal referrals? Do you get any external referrals from other veterinary practices that maybe are referring for other specialities, or also referring to you?
Yeah. So I get so I will get I get inpatient referrals to treat as inpatients from the specialities that have already got the patient as the inpatient. I also get outpatient referrals from our specialities. So I've not necessarily seen them as an inpatient, but they've come back for a recheck, and then they get referred for outpatient physio. But then I also get referring vet surgeons, so our regional vet surgeons that would be referring into the hospital for any speciality. I get a fair few referring in specifically for physiotherapy as well, so that's quite good.
Sure. And then there's obviously a surgeon that's there, so you have a surgeon who's operating there, so you're getting post-operative cases too.
absolutely. We've got multiple surgeons that do have all their different specialities. They're all European diplomats, so they've all got their own specialities. So yeah, we've actually just got our third neurologist start today, so we're getting busier and busier by the day. So I'm also getting busier and busier by the day. But
you
yeah.
really need that other staff member now.
Oh, I really do. Yeah.
You're looking for another veterinary physiotherapist to join you.
Yes. Yeah. So the aim will be that I'll eventually have that in the very short term, I'll have the equivalent of another full-time chartered physio or veterinary physiotherapist. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got 2 rooms, so you'd each have a room, so you could consult together. And
exactly.
Together. Yeah. Okay. Sure. So yeah, I mean, at the moment now, are you needing to do any marketing or anything for the practice, or you're just sort of like hoping that people are not referring because you're trying to cope on your own, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So it's I'm not doing any. So thankfully we have a marketing team, thank goodness. So I'm not having to do it all. But we are. They always want content. So if I've got interesting cases, then I will always be talking to them. In actual fact, today I've got so rather than while I've got my hoists in my 2 rooms, obviously the inpatient dogs, if they've got paralysis or plegia or tetraparesis, they obviously need to be able to walk out to be toileted, etc., by the nurses. And today we've actually got a delivery of wheeled carts. So I've now got full everything from mini down little to the tiniest little chihuahua up to massive cart for a big Great Dane that are fully adjustable. So they're going to be, the inpatients are going to be in them, but we also have plans that we'll rent those out to the carers that are taking their hemilemonectomy dogs, say, home, that I know will need support for a little while, but won't need wheels forever. And these carts are great in that their feet are always on the floor. So it's not that they're being held up, it's that they're walking, they're just sort of acting as stabilizers, essentially. So they're therapeutic as well, which is what I loved about them. So we've just done a load of filming today, so we'll be advertising about that and marketing about that. We'll also be, so the plan is they'll be used for inpatients, they'll be rented out, and also if necessary be sold on to the carers if we think that they need them long term. So we've now got that going for us as well.
It's awesome. I had the same thing in my practice. So I bought that walking wheels, basically the distributor kit.
That's it.
And then you can make up it takes a while to get used to it. To put everything together, but once you get it, it was a continual source of income for the practice because we were renting them out. We were charged a fitting fee, so a consultation to actually fit it well and perfectly so that it's balanced. But also at my practice, we generally always had a dachshund running around the practice on wheels at some time. So you have those hospital cases then that, someone will be on a little break and then they'll put the dog in a little dachshund running around the practice. And they love it. I mean, those patients absolutely love it. And like you say, I think the thing is that, it's a different story when a dog needs to have a set of wheels permanently. Okay. Then I really like the custom carts. Where we custom made, they're lighter framed and they fit them a whole lot better. But those adjustable carts, there's a place for them, and this is perfect because often we'll just use them in the interim.
Absolutely.
Those doggies that get so depressed from not being able to go for their walks, they get so excited, they jump with joy when you put them into there, and then it's maybe a month or 2 and then they're walking. So then they're and then by the time you get the custom carts, by the time you've got it and it's actually fitting and everything, then they're already walking, and that's happened many times to people. Absolutely.
Right? And the cost of the custom carts, which I get why they have to be so expensive, but wow, they can be really expensive. And if you're not 100% certain if the patient's even appropriate long term for a cart, then that can also be another bonus of having these ones to rent out in the interim, that you can confirm that the dog does actually want to use it. So I feel that they're quite beneficial in a lots of ways. Our first patient in them today was typically a little Daxi, who was desperately it's just one of those that she's doing really well post-operatively, but she's only a week post-op and she's desperately trying to walk. Second you put a sling underneath her, she goes, no, can't move, everything stops, won't move at all. Put her in this car, and after a couple of minutes of freezing, she suddenly was like, oh, I can walk. And she was absolutely so happy and running around like no one's business. So yeah, she'll go home with that, and I reckon she'll probably only need it for 2 or 3 weeks. She'll be there, because she was already starting to walk, but she had the horrible, ventro loads of ventriflexion, and she was a bit sort of side flexed and bananaed in a way, and you put her in the cart and suddenly she could walk with a flat back and both legs, rather than just using one and one sort of dangling in the wind behind her. So yeah, so much better for them therapeutically, and she had no intention of ever allowing anyone to use a sling with her to walk, so it is far more beneficial.
Yeah, and you also, if you've got the sling, you have to have a quite quick and fit owner.
Don't you?
Those little Dachshunds, so you're like running after them, and you like can't keep up with them, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, are there any other products that you're selling, rehab specific ones that you sell there?
So nothing that is sort of manufactured, but I make my own thermoplastic and neoprene supports and splints, so they all come in and I will do that as well. So that is quite challenging, and I've got my sewing machine that I sort of make weird and wonderful things with. So we had a crack at trying to make lycra garments for a dog with cerebellar hyperplasia a while back, which was mixed results, but you cannot get lycra compression garments in the UK. Hint, hint, anyone out there that wants to start supplying over here. But so I will sew away at try and make whatever adaptations to harnesses and things like this. I've actually got my sewing machine out today as well. I've been doing so much today, it sounds ridiculous, but I do this is an average day. Had an elderly Weimaraner that's scuffing one leg and not quite bringing it, so I have adapted a boot and made a sort of a unilateral Bico brace kind of thing that he's now stepping beautifully, so fingers crossed that will continue and give him a chance to sort of get out and about a bit more, and then I can strengthen him along the way. But yeah, so people will frequently find me at my sewing machine making something weird and wonderful, so that's all good.
So it was sewing something that you started doing because of a need for veterinary physio, or something that you could do before?
Something I could do before. I basically taught myself to sew because when I go out and I'm not a physio, I like to dress up in sort of 1940s, 50s clothes. And when I first got into that look, all of the dresses were just like obscenely expensive. And I was like, I'm not paying £200 for a dress. I can't afford that. What can I do? So I taught myself how to sew. Wow. Decided to, start off nice and easy, and made a bridesmaid's dress as the first thing I'd ever sewn, and then went from there.
So it's a hobby of yours now, and you're mainly making doggy stuff now. Yeah,
I do a bit of both. So I do a bit of everything. I've spent the weekend making this is great, making nappies for my kitten, who's so I have a kitten that I've just rescued, who's 4.5 months old, who was supposedly swimmer's syndrome, but I think he's got a little bit more neurological stuff going on than that, and he's urinary incontinent. So I've been sewing some reusable nappies for him, because I am not going through disposable nappies for the rest of his life, because that's going to cost me a fortune. So that was my weekend. So yeah, I do a bit of everything. Pleasure, stuff for me, stuff for friends, stuff for work.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're quite an innovator. Is there something that you've created maybe, because if I think about it, like this is what we have to do sometimes as vet rehabbers. We have a patient and there is a problem and we have to find the solution. And if it means pulling out our sewing machine and making something, is there something that you can think of that you've made that potentially you could make into a product that you could manufacture and sell that we could all use?
I haven't done yet, but I do have a lot of ideas. My current things that I'm wanting, which is more for inpatient use, is I need to make some form of, so I want to make a jacket or something that will hold a TENS machine and pads, etc. Because I've had some real success with some of my both the elderly arthritic guys that are sort of have come to they're on maximum analgesia and they're having acupuncture and laser and everything else, and we've added TENS in and given them a bit of a new lease of life, but also some of the acute pain patients that we've had, especially in our ICU, that have been on sort of maximum doses of ketamine and etc. and everything else, all the analgesics, and we've added in, and they've still been painful, and we've added in TENS and they've sat down and gone to sleep for the first time in days and things. So I want some sort of harnessing way of keeping TENS machines more safe than the randomly clipping to harnesses and things that you get at the moment. Maybe help to secure the pads in place as well. So something like that. There's I have lots of ideas as we go along.
Okay, well, we'll watch the space.
Yeah, I do. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, I through my days of practicing, I also used to make up things, and I didn't have a sewing machine, but I used to just use the needle and thread. And I also used to do a lot of thermoplastic splinting, and I remember trying to get, I had this case that I had to continually put splints on, and I got neoprene, different types of neoprene and thermoplastic, and basically sewed them together and put them in hot water and tried to make something that would actually just mold the straps and put them on. And some of them that I tried, the thermoplastic just ate the neoprene. I don't know if you've ever had that, where there's like a reaction that happens.
Yeah.
Massive holes happen, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then the one day I got it right. And I actually created a product, and basically it had thermoplastic and neoprene, and you just mold it and then strap it on.
Amazing, yeah.
But it took me ages. So as you're chatting now, it's just reminding me about all those times, and it's so fun and exciting, especially when you get it right and it works.
Oh, when you get it right, it's great.
Let's chat a little bit about that underwater treadmill. So obviously you being involved with the practice, you are probably involved in a lot of the decisions as to what equipment to buy.
Yeah.
And so underwater treadmills, we know that they are quite an investment. So what are the things that you went through with the practice? What are the things you were thinking about when you were trying to decide whether to do hydrotherapy? Was a pool something ever that came into mind, putting a small pool, or was it always the underwater treadmill, and what were your concerns?
So I was offered either, basically. I chose it was an easy decision for me as far as I was concerned. The underwater treadmill, I much prefer using the underwater treadmill because I feel it's rehabbing for function, and that's the fundamental of what we should be doing in my book. And I also felt that it was, for the most part, more usable than having a pool. So that kind of wasn't really, there weren't many considerations. I knew what I wanted, but then you've got to look at what the different types of treadmill are available, etc. And so we ended up, I love the one I've got, so I was very lucky. I got a nice top of the range one. It's all good. But I think the things that is how much you can do with it. So how big is it? So we've got the extended treadmill bed, so I can fit Great Danes and myself in there should I need to. obviously, yeah, it's got flat platforms on either side of the treadmill, so I can actually be in there with the animal, because I felt that was quite necessary. Well, it's absolutely vital with some of the more dependent patients that I was planning on putting in there. And then I've got 2 inclines on it, so I've got a 1.5 or a 3% incline, which is really good. And then the other thing, which I thought was a bit of a gimmick when we were first looking at it, but I now use so much, is the ability to reverse the belt direction, and I love that. So yeah, I think it's looking at the, you know, what it provides. You don't just want, obviously, I think pretty much all of them now provide an incline, but I do like the being able to reverse the belt direction. I find that massively helpful in some of the cases. So
yeah, so what cases are you using that functionality in?
So, well, sometimes purely and simply it's just because the dog is freaked out and they want to look at the door. So you just change the direction so they can walk in the other way. But what I actually use it for therapeutically is getting the patient to walk backwards. And I really like it for getting them to walk backwards, and it helps. So it's anything that I want to develop gluteals. Get my words right in a minute. Anything I want them to help develop gluteal strength and potentially gastroc strength, I'll get them walking backwards. So I've found it's quite useful for my MPL surgeries, that you can't get that last little bit. If you get them walking backwards, you suddenly get so much more strength and control, and you can make a big difference. I've found hock hyperextension problems, you can strengthen gastroc by getting them walking backwards, and that could be phenomenal. And I'm actually now starting to use it more and more with my end stage neurological patients, and I'm finding that it's improving their ataxia quite a lot if you can strengthen their glutes. It's quite interesting how many dogs it actually can make a difference to.
And are you helping them then? Are you doing so?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so I'm in there with them. I tend to sort of end up sort of almost hugging them. So I'm over the top of them, hugging them almost, because when you first do it, they're sort of, what are you doing to me? This is horrific and I'm not impressed. Sometimes, so I also have I have a metal platform that I can put over the top of the treadmill. So sometimes I might put their thoracic limbs on that and just get them walking backwards with their pelvic limbs, but a lot of the time I'll get them using all four limbs, and you just sort of basically hug them to stop, because what they immediately want to do is turn around and walk forwards in the opposite direction, and I'm just trying to stop them from turning. Essentially, they usually, the first couple of times, they're sort of, oh my god, what are you doing to me, but we'll allow it. I would never do it on a completely green first time in hydro patient. It's always, you know, I probably don't ever start it until maybe week 4 or 5 at the earliest. But they very quickly go, oh yeah, okay. They acclimatise and they get used to it, just like they get used to walking on a treadmill. So, and I found it really, really helpful.
Awesome, yeah. And so how many out of those cases, those sort of 10 to 12 cases you see a day, are having hydro?
So currently I have, because I've scheduled all my patients, most days I have about 4 hydro cases, and then on a Friday I have hydro day on a Friday, so I have 10 cases on a Friday that are just hydro, but I have no outpatient land-based cases on a Friday. So it's just hydro and inpatients, and then the rest of the week it's either 3 or 4 cases a day that are hydro, and then 4 slots for outpatient physio, and then the rest is inpatient stuff.
So it sounds to me like when you get your other veterinary physiotherapists, you're going to need a hydrotherapist too.
Yeah, and that is very, very shortly on the books for, that's, you know, in the 5-year plan. There's going to be a lot more staff in my department, definitely, and maybe in the 1-year plan there's definitely going to be a hydrotherapist involved as well as extra as another physio. So yeah, it's busy, but I mean, the rate that the hospital is expanding at is fantastic. So as I said, we've just got a third neurologist today, so that means my caseload is going to increase exponentially from that. So we can then expand further with the department, and I've got lots of plans that once as we do expand, as I get more staff, then there's more things I want to look at and be able to sort of go into. My heart is still respiratory, and at some point in time I do go in and see the emergency critical care cases. Every time they get an aspiration pneumonia or anything like that, they're always, Kim, can you come and have a look? And I'm always there, but I would love to spend a lot more time in ECC looking at the critical patients and looking at how we can help. I've always wanted to do research into cardiac rehab for dogs with congestive cardiac failure, because we know how effective cardiac rehab is in humans with CCF. So why are we not doing it in dogs? And let's find out if it's effective, and if it is, then let's open up a brand new area for vet physios to get involved with.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And tell me, Kim, how do you find, I know obviously because you're in the practice, so most of the specialists must be quite open to rehab. But throughout your profession, how have you found the perception from vets, about the way in which they see veterinary rehab and the referrals that you get?
It's interesting. I usually find, that's not fair to say usually, but I have frequently found that you'll maybe get referred for, the initial referral from a vet practice will be an old arthritic patient who they've done everything with, and they're like, we don't know what else to do, let's add physio. And it's a bit of a what harm can it do kind of thing, which kind of winds me up a lot. But I've found with good communication and good results, you then start interesting them and engaging them, and you then will get more and more referrals, and they'll start talking to you about different types of things. So you go from sort of just doing the odd one or two to suddenly getting a flurry from different patients, from different referring vets. I think it's all about communication, phoning them up, talking to them, emailing them, whatever. I think be concise in your reports. Be careful that you're not too wordy and not too OTT, because no vet in the world, well, no doctor ever, whether they're human or veterinary, is going to want to read 3 pages of a report. If you can't get it on 1 page, then you're writing too much, and it needs to be concise. Bullet point it if you want to, but make it clear, make it understandable. I had a lot of people telling me when I was learning, be careful with your jargon and your physio speak versus veterinary speak, which to an extent I completely agree with, but I would say don't totally stop your physio jargon, because maybe sometimes having them ask what does that mean can be a big opening into you explaining, this is my findings and these are the things that are maybe they won't have felt, because every vet I've ever spoken to, I'm sure, would admit that their palpatory skills are different to our palpatory skills, not necessarily better, worse, or either or otherwise, but they're not particularly interested in the soft squishy stuff. They want to know what the bony stuff underneath is about, whereas we're interested in the soft squishy stuff and what's going on there. So by definition, our palpation and their palpation have to be different methods, and therefore we should complement each other. And sometimes getting into those discussions because they don't know what a term is can open up a whole new world for both them and us, and can be massively helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that you've explained that, because that's exactly what the vet rehab team is about. It's about working together with the vet, because of everyone having all their different strengths.
Yeah.
For the best outcome of that animal. So I love that. So, I mean, internally now, are you having to write vet reports, or do the specialists just get to see what's happening from your notes? So, because I'm trying to think now, like, so I'm thinking like you've got the underwater treadmill and all the water management, all the cases and the internal ones, and writing all the vet reports. Like, so are you the internal ones are you writing, or is it just the external ones that?
Just the external ones. I think I'd combust if I had to do internal as well. So internal. So we've got a central notes system called EasyVet, which is great, which has all of our notes in it together. So it's pretty much like hospital case notes. So everything that happens to that inpatient is kept within one clinical record, and my physio notes are in there with all of the veterinary notes, and from there we can generate our reports, which go out to the referring vets, and also can generate client discharge reports to go to the carers as well, which are massively helpful. So yeah, but yes, the paperwork is a challenge to keep on top of, but it's, yeah, I would not manage it if I was writing vet reports internally as well as externally. It's like, no.
So if you can think about your practice, probably what is the biggest challenge that you have in practicing as a vet rehab therapist?
I think it's still promoting all of the different stuff we can potentially do. I think it's this, I love this place. The Ralph is fabulous and it's incredibly open-minded in its outlook. So there is a level of, is there anything physio can do? Let's ask and see, rather than assuming that there is nothing we can do and not bothering to ask. But even to that, when vets first start working here, obviously we're taking on staff all the time because we're a growing practice. You've still got to introduce them to all the possibilities. And I actually am now, as part of our induction program, they have a week, and everyone that comes has a week's induction, and the vets have to put up with me talking to them for half an hour, telling them what veterinary physio can do for their patients, regardless of whether they're a neurologist, an orthopedic surgeon, or internal medicine intern or clinician or specialist or anything else. But every speciality gets the physio talk, and gradually that's definitely opening up people's minds to the possibilities. I've never thought I'd work in direct conjunction with the dentistry department, but I have done. It was very interesting. I was lasering aptus stomatitis, and so we do all different stuff here, but it's purely, the other thing that's really good here is that all of our desks are open plan and all in together, and we're up above, so we've got 2 floors, and we're on the upper floor as all of our admin and all of our desks, and clinical is all downstairs. So because of the way it's open plan and we all sit, all the vets and myself sit in there together, you can, oh, by the way, while I happen to see you, is there any chance this would help? And that can open levels of interaction and sort of teamwork that potentially would be lost otherwise. So yeah, that's quite nice as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that people are calling you when they've got an emergency or critical care case, you know, that that physiotherapy is a consideration, you know. That's awesome. And if you could give advice to somebody who was about to come into the field or thinking about it, so some new graduate, what advice would you give them?
Oh God, that's difficult. So from my point of view, I feel that most of the benefits of my practice was I was lucky enough to get a part-time job straight off the bat in a referral centre, not this one, but in a different referral centre. I was covering a maternity leave, and it was incredibly helpful. It was actually more helpful when the physio came back and we could interact with each other. But I think probably because I've come up through being a chartered physio and a human physio in the NHS, I like the whole having a mentor. So I guess you don't necessarily have to work with that mentor, thinking about it, but have someone that you can have as a sounding board. You can talk to you about clinical cases, that you can get advice from, whether that be potentially just get a mentor or something like that. But I also liked because I was at the referral centre, you saw the more complex cases quickly and acutely, and that meant that I feel that my abilities as a vet physio skyrocketed in that time, because sadly, whether it's the case everywhere or not, the majority, if you are setting up as immediately as an outpatient only, like home visit service or whatever, in a vet clinic by yourself over here, you don't get the variety of patients necessarily, and then it can be easy to just get into, I can do post-ops, I can post-op TPLOs, I can do MPLs, I can, but you won't necessarily see polyradicular neuritis and fun and weird and wonderful things, but they're the ones that you really have to get your clinical reasoning going for, and they're the ones that will make you a better physiotherapist potentially.
I love the idea about the mentor. I think that, if I look at even vets, a lot of them really struggle when they first come into practice.
Yeah.
They sort of get thrown in the deep end. And we've got some Facebook groups called the Hydro Vet Rehabbers, Small Animal Vet Rehabbers, and Equine Vet Rehabbers. And we've actually just started on a mentor-mentee program there.
Yeah.
So basically people can just sign up, and we are going to facilitate putting people together. So if any of you are listening and you're looking for a mentor, please hop over into our groups, and there's a link, it's pinned at the top. Just fill in the forms there, and we will try and find a mentor or mentee for you if you're volunteering to be a mentor. Kim, thank you so much. There's a podcast that I've heard about, and I'm trying to now work out, on top of all the things that you do, when you have time to do a podcast too, but you've actually got your own podcast. Before we finish up, do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
It was a couple of years ago now, and it hasn't been added to recently, but it might relive in the future. But it was essentially Shailene, who's the CEO, and the Ralph was all his idea, and myself having a chat about physio stuff. So he's an emergency, Shailene Jasani, who's a fab guy, but he is an emergency and critical care specialist. So when I first got together and sort of found him and was like, so you're making a hospital, can I be physio at your hospital? And he was like, yes, okay. He knew nothing about physio, so then we started talking about it, and then one day he was like, we should do this as a podcast, because this would be good to get some knowledge out to people. So it's a bit of just me rambling on the phone, but as you've probably worked out from this, I can ramble quite well, so yeah, have a listen.
It's called The Ralph. We'll put the link in the description for those of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kim, thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome chatting to you. And thank you for giving up your time and sharing, and because you're lecturing for us
Yes.
coming up soon too. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So yeah, and have an awesome day. And I really am holding thumbs for you that you get some help, because just listening makes me feel exhausted.
Yes. I'm very much looking forward to some help. Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. And please, if you get a moment, head over to Stitcher or iTunes and leave me a review. It's a really lonely job being a podcaster, and so the only time I get to hear from you or know that you're out there is when I get a review. And know that I read every single one of your reviews. So to those of you that have left reviews, I want to say a very big thank you. Every time we get a review, it really helps to get the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast out there to all the vet rehabbers all over the world. Alright, vet rehabbers, so if you are looking for more continuing education in the field of veterinary rehabilitation, head over to onlinepethhealth.com. Go be awesome, guys.